It's podcadzo.
You know we crack them in the mic, JJ. You want to do them synchronized? 1, 2, 3.
Oh, that was
Maximum explosion.
Dude, yeah.
When it's just Colin by himself and he does it, I kind of want to punch him in the but
Together,
since it was
it's
you doing
Yeah,
it with him,
dude.
it was like a nice camaraderie
Having
thing.
the second track really hits.
Yeah.
probably
yeah, we're just doubling the snare.
Yeah,
That's all we're doing. All right, well, this is our good friend, ladies and gentlemen. I can't believe it took over a year of podcadzo to get him on. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm saying it because it sounds good.
Yeah, just over a year.
He was I want to say you were our inaugural guest on our past podcast, right? He was our first one?
I think
Or our second one? You were definitely like top one of the first two guests that we had on the last podcast, and you were also one of our most stringent supporters. So, yeah, it's kind of like a cardinal sin that it took so long to get you here, but you're here now. It's Janzen, everybody.
Thank you so much for having me on, boys.
Don't worry, we'll add
welcome
more
here,
claps
JJ.
too.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Air horn.
So, for those who don't know, JJ is not only a cool dude who likes Guinness, he is also a musician in Fort Collins and someone who works in the local music scene as well. He's in a band called Knuckleball, which I dare say is probably one of the more OG local bands at this point. Like, you guys have been around for a goddamn minute, and you've been playing shows steady the whole time. Built up a huge following, I would say. You guys are working on your debut album now. You've got some singles out, so
True, that's all true.
there's a lot of big stuff in the pipeline for Knuckleball and JJ. So
Let me pause there and commend the singles. They all sound great, man. Super dope. Are there two or three singles of this off the
thank
album?
you, man. We got 2 singles out right now off the album, River Runs Dry and Sicily, and we got another one we're going to release. It's the last kind of prep leading up to the releasing the full album. That single's going to come out in about a month, hoping for like November release for the full album.
nice,
Yeah.
awesome. So we'll get into those more later.
Yeah.
Don't want to blow my load too early, as I'm known for doing.
Premature ejaculator
First,
here,
still.
folks.
Oh, it's almost worse now than it was before. But anyway, I figured we should start from the beginning again, because we've kind of already done this last time you were on our other podcast, so I don't want to be overly redundant or boring or pastiche, if you will. Thanks.
And I will.
But we got to do a quick little recap so that the people know who you are, what you're about, what you stand for, what are your values and your views on life and politics and socioeconomics and all that stuff.
And
Religion.
You can kind of glaze
So-
over not having seen Lord of the Rings yet and the pro wrestling stuff because we've covered that.
We did
That's
cover
been
that
covered.
already. Yeah. So
yeah, did we covered the jam bands too, right?
well, we do need to talk about the jam
No, yeah,
bands
we need-
again.
we
So
need to do that.
I figure like that's probably a good place to start. When we met just through work and stuff, we were just like casual friends through work. I just knew that you liked Phish. That was like the thing that I knew about you. So I figured that'd probably be a good place to start. Why is Phish good?
And before we go any further, have your opinions on U2 changed at all?
Yeah, so Phish is good for a plethora of reasons. My opinions on U2, I actually have a lot more respect for them after finding out about how much you guys enjoy and respect them, honestly, truthfully.
Dude, we got another
we
one.
got another one.
No,
That's
for
like
real.
3 converts now, I think. Or maybe just
I can only
2.
think of 2.
Connor and you.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
It's the truth, because I even like, songs that you guys probably would be like, oh, this fucking noob or whatever with YouTube, but things like, like Sweetest Thing or something silly,
Dude,
like even
oh,
like...
man.
That's like Julian's
It's
favorite.
like one of my favorite
song.
YouTube songs ever.
Yeah, no, so good.
He talks
dude.
about the video for that almost every episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, well, it's been at least a couple episodes.
No, great tune, but like even something like, when the Vertigo came out on the iPods, like they had that weird Apple iPod for it. I remember like that album. I think it was How to Defuse an Atomic Bomb.
Close enough.
Close to that. Yeah.
We won't
I mean,
crack that.
I'll even did like I never took that off the iPod. And to this day, some of those songs are still like recognizable, familiar. I'm like, all right, I'm not gonna skip this.
Hell
in
yeah.
my library of Spotify now. So
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm glad that I asked
Beautiful.
about Phish and we wound up talking about you too.
Yeah,
That's
dude.
honestly
Well,
I
perfect
was.
for this podcast.
I made sure that you 2 were going.
Back to Phish, though. What were were you saying? We met because we worked together and stuff. You worked actually in the coffee shop next door to the sandwich shop that I worked in.
Oh yeah,
at
I guess
first.
we did
Yeah.
meet before we worked together.
Totally. But then when you started working at the sandwich shop, which shall not be named, the reason that Phish rules in that setting is because instead of listening to like the corporate radio bullshit that they wanted you to have on, I could queue up like 3 Phish songs, and that would take
That'd
up
be like the shift.
like 70 minutes of time without having to change a song or queue anything up. And it was just a really easy way for to keep something on in the background that I felt was a lot better than the same old radio stuff that you hear in the grocery store or whatever.
Well, and also fits the vibe of the shop that we worked at. And also, like, you weren't the only one. Like, everyone was on that tip. So
it was a dangerous game we were playing. So sometimes you have a Phish, 3 Phish fans on a shift, and that's your night. Is you listen? Oh yeah, we're listening to this '92 St. Louis show, followed by Chicago '96, and then your shift's over.
Yeah. Well, so I guess at that point, and my recollection of it is, people started asking me when I started working there, like, do you like jam bands? That was like one of the first things. Like, do you like Phish? Do you like the Grateful Dead? It was like Humphreys McGee, which I don't even know if they are a jam band, but just like that type of shit.
Sure.
People were asking me if I liked it, and I was always just like, never really like listened to it, never really been about it. I honestly fucking at that point hated jam bands. I hated anything that involved a solo because I was just kind of a prick. So I remember it was always with everyone else like this dialogue of like, you should like them because they're good, but when we talked about it, and you, I think, wanted to convert me early on. So it was very much like coming from an educated perspective of like, well, these guys are really gifted musicians, and like they do odd time signature stuff. They do like weird harmonies, weird fucking chords, just weird shit all the time. They're actually like super experimental. And that was like the way that you kind of tried to get me into them a bit more. But the thing that I always remember was just like a very deep passion for it. Like the music, and not necessarily like the lifestyle that comes with it, but just like the activity of not only being a Phish fan, but also like listening to all the live sets, seeing them, every year when they come through, and just like being part of like that community of people that like all fuck with it super hard. Like, what is it about them to like someone like me or Colin who like doesn't see it from the outside? Like, what is it about Phish that like got you whenever they did and like kept you engaged for all these years?
Yeah, man, that's a good question. When I first saw them live in, it was 2009, I believe, 2010 maybe, at the latest, in high school. And I just remember, that's kind of the era of, like, when I started really getting into, playing guitar and getting deep into music and musical history and stuff. And, I was very familiar with these bands, Grateful Dead, Allman Brothers. It's kind of the stuff I grew up on, my dad. And they're the only really other band it felt like that was doing it on that level of where they were mixing like improvisation every night mixed with like changing up the set list entirely, not playing songs back to back nights. Like if they got a 3-night run in Denver, they're not playing a single same song back to back, Seeing that all live for the first time, it was just in like being encapsulated by like basically the circus coming to town, is like it blew our young little hippie minds, You start seeing the same band several times, and the beauty of it is that you don't see the same set list ever. The tricky part is that they have all these songs that you do want to see, and you're not guaranteed that you're going to see them, right? So you start chasing songs, wanting to see shows just because you're chasing after a few songs, and then 5 years and 20 shows later, you're still doing the same thing, and you've built like this community of friends and family along the way who are doing the same thing as you,
Yeah.
So it's kind of that all-encompassing. Obviously the music, but I just don't feel like there's a lot of other scenes like it right now, or even in the history of music. There's very few that have that kind of like circus comes to town feel,
Totally. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. It does, even just not going to the shows, but just knowing about them, it does feel a bit like there's a spectacle to be had. Like, it almost feels like you're missing out on something, even if you don't want to be there. It's like, damn, there's 20,000 people in a fucking parking lot right now.
I do have that tinge of FOMO whenever I hear people going to a Phish concert.
It does sound genuinely really fucking fun,
Similar to how we converted you to a U2 fan, the first time I really like took phish seriously was after we had you on the pod, and you sent me. I forget which album. Do you remember which album you would have sent me to listen to?
You know, I bet it was. I want to say Billy Breeze is the name of the album.
That sounds familiar.
Because it's got some straightforward.
It's like
rock and roll.
mid-90s.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the album that back in when I was that summer going into like freshman year of high school, I inherited a huge record CD collection from my uncle who had just passed, and he had that phish album, and that was my gateway to phish, and that's kind of what I like to send other people, just because it's an easy listen and it's not too experimental or anything. It's just like easy on the ears.
Yeah, I enjoyed that one a lot, and I might actually go to my first phish show next time they come to Dick's, which I think is this fall, because I have a friend in Denver who's like super into it.
Yeah, dude.
Isn't it like this weekend?
Yeah, this coming weekend actually.
Shit,
Yeah.
okay, I'm not going there.
next year. Yeah, we'll go next year.
All
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
good deal.
Yeah, there'll be people there that at
Bummer.
least. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so I guess the other part of this is also like, and we kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but like you were playing guitar or starting to get more into guitar at around the time you discovered phish. How much did like discovering phish influence like your playing and just the way that you like viewed guitar?
Man. Yeah, it changed everything. Because at some point when you're playing guitar, you get when you learn all the chords you feel like you need to learn. You can write songs, but at some point you want to start mixing in solos, or even just lead parts, not even these extended solos. And the way that I really learned to do that into solo and like learning the modes, learning different scales was going on, YouTube and pulling up these long phish jams or like phish backing tracks, and trying to like do my best to sound like Trey to those tracks, and failing miserably, and I still fail miserably to this day to sound like him, but it's how I learned a lot of like the theory and what was going on. And once I felt like once I heard it and understood what Trey was doing, it was like this big gateway it opened my ears to like hearing other musicians doing similar things, but in different musical contexts. You can pick out the same scales that they're basing some of these jams and songs around you can go hear in old jazz standards, you know what I mean? It's not just It's not like they're reinventing the wheel or anything, but it was kind of like, and I should say they cover so many different songs and genres that it was kind of like that's another gateway itself into like learning these different styles of music, is like hearing them do it and being like, okay, this is cool. Looking up, is this an original or is this a cover if I never heard it before or something?
Sure.
And like, yeah.
That's the coolest part about phish to me, is the amount of musical ground that they cover. Like they draw so many different influences into their music, but it always winds up still having like that intrinsic like phish value to it.
Yeah.
Which is not a whole lot of bands can really do that.
Speaking of just covering a lot of ground musically, I know we played a show with you live one time, and we both came on stage actually to do a Ween cover.
Yeah, hell yeah.
And
I forgot about that.
It's funny I had such a negative view towards phish for a while because I was always such a Ween fan.
Yeah.
And it's not like they're a million miles away. Like
Sure.
And Ween it's funny, Ween was one of the other groups, like, back in the day when we were all working together, like, that was one of the bands that I just, like, didn't know that much about, and everyone got me into it. And JJ actually took me to a Ween show, which, like, totally opened my eyes to, like, that whole universe of, like, I like a bunch of bands where like each album is super different and like they dive into concepts a lot, but like never really a band where like they're not overtly just like taking it super seriously the whole time.
Yeah.
And so it was like a really good meeting of the worlds where it's like they can definitely be super conceptual and very like narrowed in on a certain goal, but they can also be like very light and playful and like super fun about that concept that they're attacking. So
yeah, well said.
Yeah, Ween and phish alike, different styles and vibes certainly, but I think what I like most about those bands and why they're two of my favorite bands ever, it's like one song on the album will leave you in tears, the other song is so dirty and grimy, you want to take a fucking bath after,
take a shower.
like seriously. And that's how my range of emotions feel sometimes. They're all over the place, so I like the bands that can they're not just overly positive or overly sad. I like being able to mix a little satire in there, a little being able to laugh at yourself.
Absolutely.
And the absurdity of rock and roll.
Because they do, and they played some songs at that show too that were like very serious, like not like funny ha-ha-ween songs. Like the range that they express in one set was insane. So definitely very eye-opening.
They go from a song about their dying dog into a song about HIV and how it rocks. Like, it's like not a lot of the bands like that.
Exactly.
Okay,
so I kind of wanted to ask about the formation of Knuckleball in a sense, because like obviously you personally very influenced by Phish and Trey and the whole universe of wanting to be in a band that, I guess, for lack of a better term, is like modular. Like things can change, things can grow. Y'all can play with your songs, and it's not like the end of the world if, something's not played exactly the same twice in a row. But it's weird. Like over the years, I feel like you guys have maybe. I don't really think of you guys as a jam band right now. Like when you guys came onto the scene and like were playing a bunch of shows back in the day, trying to like establish yourselves a bit more. There was like this kind of just, I guess, conversation in the zeitgeist in the common like Fort Collins scene of like Knuckleball is a jam band or whatever. But like you guys, all your songs have like structure and a point, and like you can tell that you always know exactly what's going to happen next when you guys are playing a song. Like it's all very well rehearsed, but then there still are like very extended open jams where there is improvisation and certain players are like highlighted more. So there is like that element of jam bandiness, but like, I don't know, you guys seem more structured almost to me than like the typical jam band would, and not in like a bad way, but honestly, in my opinion, it's like in a really good way. Because the thing that I don't like about jam bands is like when it starts to feel aimless, like someone's just playing for the sake of playing. And I like never feel that way when I listen to you guys play live or in studio either, now that we are listening to these singles. But like, do you guys make an intentional choice when you're writing songs of like, this isn't jammy enough, this is too jammy, or like, is it just whatever feels the most organic? Or do you guys feel like maybe you've moved away from that over the years of like the idea of writing songs to the point of just having big open jams? Like, does that make any fucking sense?
It totally does. No, and I think it's more on a song to song basis, sort of like how it plays out. But I will say that whereas, years ago we needed to just extend songs just for the sake of like, we got hired to play a 3-hour set. We only have 2 hours worth of material. We need to drag these songs out a bit, right?
Sure.
Yeah. In doing so, we find certain things that we can, almost like Swiss Army knife tools that we have in our back pocket that now where we have so much more of a catalog of music, we could still whip out some of these same tricks to kill time, to take up, extend stuff out a bit, fill that time up. But it sounds a lot more intentional with what we're doing because we've just had practice doing it. It's not just like the aimlessly jamming, like kind of like you referred to. I appreciate you saying that too, because it's hard to, in the jam band world, to, not just fall into the, let's do a happy groove.
Just noodling.
Yeah, noodling. And we try specifically not to do that, or if like there is some noodling, at least it's working towards the next section or next improvisational section.
I think that's what it is, honestly, is it's always... the jams always happen in like build-up sections when it's going to be in a transitionary moment into something else. And the other thing that's cool about that idea, I guess, of like having more songs, therefore not needing to necessarily like extend all the songs, is like, I feel like now you guys have some songs that are pushing y'all's boundaries a little bit more of like what you would have wanted to do a few years ago versus like what the end goal is now. And I feel like that translates, especially with like some of the newer songs. Like, I don't want to jump ahead too much, but the song Sicily, to me, it's a fucking great song, and it's like super distinct amongst the rest of your guys' songs because it's less of like a open-ended improvisational tune and more of just like a verse chorus type of tune, which like I haven't necessarily heard too much of from you guys in the past. So it's just cool, like, to see that range being like flexed a little bit more nowadays.
Totally, man. I gotta give our newest guitarist Ben a shout out. He's been with us a little over a year now, and he is such a good songwriter, has such a good mind for music. Doesn't necessarily come from the same background as Alex, our keyboard player, Eric is me, where we kind of come from that jammy, psychedelic kind of background. You know, Ben, sure, that's in his game, but at the heart of it, he's just a really good songwriter. And I think that a lot of the newer music we're putting out has hit, like, that's one of his songs. You know, we kind of put together the middle jam, but like all the changes, the words and everything, that's all Ben. And you know, credit to him because his songwriting and his style of songwriting, it complements us all really well, where, like you're saying, he can have these written verse, chorus, bridge parts and then let someone shine during this little jam section. And that's kind of how I feel like I like to write these days is, you know, not worrying about the jam section, just having like this concise piece of music, a really nice song, because a good song can go a lot further than a good jam, you know, to like the casual listener.
Sure.
And just a song, like you said, a song like Sicily, it does a really good job of like showcasing, I think, a lot of different talents from people in the band.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good way of putting it too. It's very like even flow throughout the whole song. Like there are moments where every person in the group kind of shines. And this is also a good segue. I kind of wanted to ask, like, so you guys were a 2-guitar band for a while in the beginning, and then for a while it was just you, and then if I remember correctly, you had someone somewhat playing guitar with you sometimes, like when it worked out, and other times it was just you. And then I hadn't seen you all for like over a year, I guess, and then you have this new guitarist now. What was the final decision to like get a full-time new member in?
Ben had played in a local band called Muckluck, and they kind of went through a split. They had some members moving away and such. He reached out to some of us in Knuckleball because he had booked a show already under Muckluck, but he needed now some members to kind of fill out the band, you know? And we just started kind of jamming and playing together, and it went from like us just doing that one show with Ben, filling in for, you know, a couple members, to being like, okay, this is actually like going really well. We've been looking for another guitar player for a while. Do you want to just like, you know, try these shoes on, see how they fit? And like we haven't stopped running since, you know what I mean? It's been a little over a year now, and it feels like we've made a lot of progress. And I got to give a shout out to our newest drummer too, Scott. He came on as the same time that Ben did. He came from Muckluck as well, and you know, so it's kind of cool that they had a cohesiveness together. The four of us had a cohesiveness together, and us combining forces, it just worked really well.
That's right.
Know?
Yeah. And I wanted to give a shout out to Eric too, because like that dude was just so in the pocket at the last show that I saw y'all at. I feel like the rhythm section has just done nothing but like drastically improve over the last few years.
Yeah, man. Eric's the most disciplined as far as practice and learning theory and stuff goes. He's still taking, you know, weekly lessons and stuff, and you know, over watching him improve over the, you know, the 4 or 5 years I've been playing with him, it's been pretty mind blowing, honestly. Like he's a totally different musician than when we started playing.
Yeah.
And he, you know, he teaches us a lot of stuff at every practice. You know, he's got that ear, knows when something works, something doesn't, you know.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, good for him. I feel like, the glow up for him has been the most noticeable, like transformation wise, because you and Hagen, I feel like y'all kind of already knew. But obviously, things change, ideas change, what you want to do changes over time. But for the most part, like your style has been kind of consistent throughout.
Totally.
And to see him like kind of meld into your style, but also do his own thing. Like I saw him really step out a lot and work like a lot more kind of opposing ideas into songs and stuff.
Totally.
So I thought that was really cool.
I like how you say step out too, because like even on, it's one of those things I try to be conscious on stage, you know, like when Eric is doing something awesome or Ben is doing something cool, I kind of try to move to the back of the stage just to like get out of their way almost. I want that spotlight, that shine to be on them. I think that's something we're all kind of looking on. But Eric, like, went from being very back behind by the bass cab, you know, in his own little pocket, to being like a real face
He's a
of
central
the band,
member,
you know?
yeah,
like,
totally, absolutely. Sick. So I guess kind of another transition now. When you guys were like sitting down and like talking about making a new album or, you know, putting together a bunch of songs to release, however the idea came up, like, was there an initial thought of like what you wanted the release to like sound like or be like or have any sort of specific aesthetic, or are you guys just kind of winging it as you record?
You know, we had a general plan going into it. It's funny because, you know, I've been playing music with Eric and Hagen for so long now, Hagen specifically. And I mean, I've known him since we were like second grade, you know,
Yeah.
but we've never actually recorded any of our music, you know, it took forever for us to do. And, you know, we had the material, like we had enough material to do something without Scott and Ben if we wanted to, but it just like, something about getting in the studio when we like weren't set on, okay, are we going to add this good drummer? Are we going to add another guitarist for sure? Like, so we just, you know, we kind of kept pushing it off as long as possible. And then after we started playing with like Ben and Scott, you know, they brought so many good songs to us. We're like, okay, we got to put out a record because there's just way too much. Like, we're all feeling really good about these songs, feel like we have enough material to do a bunch of records now. Let's start getting it out there. And so we basically, you know, we kind of just ran down the list of what songs would hold up. We felt better, like, in a studio setting compared to ones that, you know, feel a little better live but maybe aren't as cohesive to put, you know, record on an album. And, you know, we wrestled with that just for a couple weeks probably, and after those couple weeks we hit the ground running on recording, and there was not a lot of change ups or knuckleballs, curveballs coming at combing our way in the recording session. Like, once we got in there, we're like, okay, this all feels good. We are happy about the songs we're picking, and yeah.
Okay.
So obviously, like you had structured songs, but as we've touched on, like when you're playing them live, there's room for improvisation and jamming. So how do you handle that in the studio?
Yeah, you know, some songs, just like we took specific parts that we do live and we didn't even record them to studio, just because, you know, if we took out those parts, it's like it's a minute off the song, right? And if we're trying to make something that's like a nice easy listen, you don't want every song to be 8 minutes, 9 minutes. You got to have some that are, you know, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. So a lot of like restructuring for certain songs. On the other hand, there were a couple that we said, fuck it, we're just going to do live takes, for full band live takes,
Nice.
just to cut them so that they did kind of feel like how we felt when we were playing them live. And we had a little room to, like, you know, we did a few takes of them. Some were better than others. We were kind of able to pick out which one we felt better about. But, you know, a mix of dialing in, making things as tight as possible, and having that game plan, like, kind of written out, then going to record them worked. And then realizing that, okay, that's not going to work on a couple songs, let's just cut them like live tracks and take it from there.
Were there any times where you were kind of like chasing the spontaneity of like playing it live, or like you were missing that element?
Totally. There's one tune that's going to be coming out. It's called Sebastian, and I very much wanted to write it out and structure it and have it be this really tight studio piece. And I was basically the only one who felt that way, and it turned out that I was totally wrong. Like, we couldn't dial it in the way we wanted to, no matter how I was writing out, no matter the feel. We just couldn't get it like we were playing live. We did the live recordings for it, and instantly I like told the guys, like, you guys are right, like, for sure. Like, this is one that we can't really capture that magic unless we record it this way, you know?
Yeah.
I'm trying to force something into a box that it doesn't fit in, you know? Yeah.
I feel like I've heard jam dudes talk about that before. Like, I played this drum fill this one way in Philadelphia, and I've never been able to play it since.
The Philly
way
fill,
since
dude.
then.
Yeah.
Philly fill.
Oh, yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Do you guys, like, if someone is taking like an extended solo in something that you guys are tracking for the record, is that still like a fully improvised solo, or do you guys try to write those a little differently for the actual recording?
You know, I guess it's what's helped us on these two songs that we did, you know, they were kind of songs that we played differently every time, and then we locked in these recordings, and now when we play them live, there's certain, like, you know, riffs or licks that have now become like a staple of the song that we play like every time almost now because we are so used to hearing it on that recorded record now. It like feels a little weird to do it without. We still, we improv off of that live, but there's certain like, I like to call them tasters, that you just lay down a taster and everyone knows, okay, this next section is coming. The timing or length of when we do it is different a lot of the time, but that identifiable like lick or change, we've kind of like grown accustomed to playing that live like most of the time.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think that's super cool because, again, like people do take random parts from like solos, like just random melodic ideas or phrases that they hear that are memorable, and then they associate those with like crucial transitionary moments of the song. So it's cool that you guys know which ones those are and you can still work them in even while on the spot like improvising. So that's super cool.
Yeah, totally.
I kind of wanted to ask like, and this, I don't know if you even know the answer to this, but I've over the years like obviously watching Hagen play is incredible. He's a fucking incredibly gifted musician, and he has a wide variety of like influences and styles, I would say. But like the one thing that I always feel when I watch him play is like he's like a New Orleans jazz player. Like he's got like some Cajun soul. Like where does that come from? Do you know? Like,
dude, we just that's so funny you say that because Hagen likes certain songs. He'll go off on these things called raps, and it's basically just him, some good old-fashioned New Orleans funk or something playing, and it's him just improvising words. Sometimes it's singing, sometimes it's talking, sometimes it's just babbling, but like that comes very much from a guy like Dr. John, Right Place, Wrong Time, if you guys are familiar, like that tune. That's his probably most well-known one, but just kind of that mix of being an entertainer with a musician, and I guess that's some of where that improv comes from. I couldn't tell you exactly how Hagen initially got into those kind of musics, I take it's from going to the festival scene and stuff like that in high school, jam band-ishy kind of stuff, funk kind of stuff. I can't tell you that he loves Widespread Panic. We all are big Widespread Panic fans. I grew up on a lot of like Southern rock. That was just my dad's preference, and so I think that kind of like background is inherently, just kind of in him now. It's like what I was saying about when I was learning to play Phish or the Dead or whatever. That kind of came through while I was learning to play. I think that when Hagen was really learning to play and start to really get a grip and like mastery of his instrument, I think that's just happened to be the type of music that he was listening to at the time. Like that Little Feat, Widespread Panic, I said Dr. John kind of vibes, the Meters, like those kind of Neville Brothers, those kind of vibes. And I think that's where a lot of it comes from. And I'm glad you brought that up because I told him after our last show, I was like, dude, that was like a straight up Dr. John moment. And he's like, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely always been a very comfortable, just like natural performer. Like, it doesn't seem like he gives a shit if people are watching
show
him.
is admirable.
Yeah,
he's an easy guy to just watch, and like you have fun watching him.
Totally, we rely on him too because there's a lot of pressure when you're playing live to talk between songs and keep banter going, so there's not moments of awkward silence with the crowd or whatever. And Hagen is very good at filling up those moments with his musings, his ramblings, his
quips.
Advice, his quips, whatever you want to call them, whatever is on his mind. He really is a good job of like keeping the audience engaged and on their toes. He says a lot of ridiculous shit too, so it's like making sure people are actually listening and stuff. It's cool. Yeah, it's cool. Yeah.
How much like you kind of touched on this earlier, so I don't want to be overly redundant, but like how much of the songs on these, well, first of all, I guess rough guesstimate, how many total Knuckleball songs would you say that there are right now?
It's a tough question. With this group that we play with, like Ben and Scott too, over the last year, I would say we're close to like 20. But like we still have, by we I mean like Hagen, myself, Eric, we have like a big catalog of tunes that we used to play as Knuckleball and don't play anymore, and that number's probably closer to like 30, 35.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Are you guys planning on bringing any of those back into the picture?
It's at some point, yes, for sure. The thing is that we had, we spent so much time over the last few years, like having to, whether it was the rotating guitarist Mark, who we had before Ben, or Nick on drums, who we had before Scott, we spent so much time like having to practice and rehearse these tunes that we already knew and had already written, but we had to practice them with them and get them down. A lot of our I feel like would almost rather, instead of like rehashing them and doing that same thing, going back, relearning these tunes again now for like with the third new lineup or whatever, we'd just rather like write new stuff. You know what I mean?
Oh,
And
totally.
just like that stuff's on the back burner if we ever want to bring it out one day or need it for any reason, like we have it. But right now it feels like a little better. Like we got Ben and Scott up to speed on the things that like we felt like were crucial, and from there on out we've been learning their tunes, or we've been all writing together doing new stuff.
Got
Yeah.
it. So like out of those, I guess 20 songs that you guys have in the can right now with the current lineup, would you say that it's like a pretty even mixture of like you and Hagen and Ben writing, or is it like every song is fully collaborative, or like it sounds like Ben brought some pretty complete ideas to you guys?
For sure. There's been very minimal. We've done some filling out of Ben's songs that he's brought to us, but for the most part, he had them written and with a pretty certain vision, or with like a style that they kind of already played in the past. And I would say that's probably like close to half our tunes now are like Ben tunes that he's like brought to us, whether it's in full or we had to work out some parts or whatever. The other half is, I would say, 50% Ben, 40% me, 10% that we've written like actually all together as like 6 of us at a time. Hard thing to do, it's more, it's usually, that's why it's a little bit easier sometimes when like Ben comes with an idea or I come with an idea, because it's just getting things off the ground with 6 people is really tough. When you kind of have that foundation already, it makes filling it out a lot easier.
Totally.
Yeah.
Because then, you guys can all just kind of go your own separate ways too at the end of a practice and work on the separate things on your own and build new ideas that way. You guys just did like a little mini Chicago run. I guess we need to kind of mention the roots in Chicago a little bit.
Sure. Yeah.
I think it forms the aesthetic of Knuckleball a fair bit.
Yeah.
And informs the context a little bit of like some of the lyrical content and just the vibe of the music in general.
Sure.
How did the Chicago run go?
It went really well. It was a lot of fun. For being our first out-of-state plays, if Chicago felt like the right move, because we had, 4 of us out of the 6 being from there originally. We just already had a built-in audience of, like, friends and family that we knew would come. It's not some stressful thing being like, oh, are people going to be here? Are we going to make any money? Is like, how are we going to pay for this, fund this? That felt natural because it's pretty close, and we knew people would come. We knew we had the support there. So that took a lot of the stress, I feel like, off of the trip, because like we got to just kind of show Ben and Scott the city and stuff. Have them hang with our friends and family, eat a bunch of good food with them and everything, and not really have to worry about the show stuff until the day of show or whatever, until leading up to the show, until loading started. There wasn't any anxiety in that regard. Definitely learned a lot. Like touring, as they say, seems like a very expensive thing to do nowadays, and the logistics of like I was thinking we got so lucky with doing the Chicago and having the places to stay and sleep, not having to worry about paying for hotels or like being able to borrow equipment from friends and stuff like that. You're not able to do that if you're planning a tour through Wyoming, Utah, Montana, whatever. It's like a lot different logistically, and probably a little less open-minded to the music that you're playing. And it's inspiring. It's like a little frustrating to think about now. How do you make the touring work in other spots outside of Chicago, because that works so well for us? But it's also like a challenge that I think we're kind of looking forward to, is like figuring out, okay, how do we make this a little bit more feasible if we're going to do this in other states and other areas? It's a good good challenge to look at, good problem that you gotta kind of solve and figure out some different angles. But I think we all are looking to do that, is play outside of Colorado more. We just want to make sure it makes sense and that it's not costing us money.
Totally. Yeah. I was gonna ask. You kind of answered it for me, but it seemed almost from the outside like this would be like almost a test run, like a dry run of a potential small road, like just 5 or 6 road stops along,
Totally.
Colorado, neighboring states in the future. Is that something that you guys would want to do?
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Fuck yeah. Well, I'm here for it. I think you guys should do it. I feel like overall it's hard to know exactly like what cities, what states you're going to do well in, what people are going to like give a shit about your music, but overall, like, I feel like you guys play a good enough set and a well-rehearsed enough set, and you have good enough chemistry that alone could sell you almost anywhere. So
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely feel good about the music, and it's just at some point when we're a Fort Collins band, and you can always grow in your market, but if that marginal growth becomes less and less the longer you're around, and you got to start playing other places, and that doesn't mean just playing the next big city nearest to you, like Denver or Boulder or whatever. A lot of times you're gonna get a better payday and a better turnout if you're willing to go out of state and play at places that kind of have a built-in audience or are known for being like a music bar that people are going to go and see this band regardless of, people are going to be there drinking, partying, or whatever, regardless of what band it is. There's just people that come to hang out at that spot, and I think that those are the places we're trying to lock down and be able to like make a tour out of, is because those are the places you want to play, is like not to a dead room, and people that are excited to be there.
yeah, totally. Hell yeah, that's awesome, dude. I hope that you guys are able to make some good ground there soon, and
Thanks, man.
having
Yeah.
an album out on streamers will help a lot with that too, because you can literally just be like, yo, this is what we sound like, and then send someone an album, and then it's a lot easier for them to book you knowing like
Sure.
that you have X amount of monthly listeners and all that bullshit that matters nowadays for no reason.
Yeah, that's a tough game. The monthly listeners, the YouTube subscribers and stuff.
Such a grind.
Yeah, man, it's such a grind, and it gets really frustrating at times. But just being on, I work in the music industry outside of being in a band, and being on that end of things definitely has opened my eyes to like those metrics, like being shitty and making you feel shitty sometimes as a musician, but being important from the business aspect of like, this venue is a business. We're trying to stay in business. We need to book people that make sense, not just people that are like awesome, talented musicians. You have to have some type of momentum behind you too,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Especially when live music is becoming less of like a mandate for people and more of just like an occasional splurge. Like ticket prices are getting more expensive. People just don't have as much interest in live music as they did like 15, 20 years ago.
It's true.
So taking all those things into account, being a touring band, it's like, oh shit, like, yeah, are people going to be here? Did anyone leave their house? Did anyone even like see what we posted on Instagram about this show or whatever? But then also from the business side of it, it's like there are less tickets being sold. There are generally less touring acts performing, and less touring acts performing that have consistent pull through in like a bunch of different states. So there's a lot of different factors there for sure.
Yeah, and at the same time, there's we look at these like at the venue I work at where they're booking and stuff. They look at a lot of these metrics when they're booking bands and trying to figure out who they want to bring in, what makes sense. And another thing that I found out too is that like a lot of these numbers and metrics are like these artists or bands are absolute bullshit. Like they're either paying for followers, paying for listens, doing something to get not authentic follows or listens on their music, and and it reflects in not just like ticket sales a lot of the time, but even like post and social media interactions from our end. Like we get a pretty good idea of what shows people are excited about based on certain, posts getting comments or likes, whatever. And these bands with like 1 million TikTok followers, 500,000 monthly listeners or whatever, they'll get, when we're posting about them and stuff, they're not getting any responses or anything like that. Or like the ones that are responding to it, it's a lot of bot type of stuff or like sketchy fake profiles. and it's like hard to weed out some of that at times. And like I said, just, you know, it's a little discouraging that like people are getting away with that. And it makes you think like I would be an idiot to not try to like boost my numbers or pump my numbers and stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't think, you know, none of us are interested in that kind of fake representation or like, you know, gassing up the numbers, as they say.
Well,
you know?
we've
Yeah.
talked about this on the pod before, that whenever I come across a band that has a very obvious and calculated social media presence purely for likes, it really turns me off of them,
Yeah.
like from the get-go.
Sure.
Like that's a bigger hurdle to overcome for liking their music if I know they're, you know, doing that on social
Yeah,
media.
man.
There are obviously a lot of bands who have both of it and can do it really well, but I feel like the bands who do that got known first because of their music and then crafted a social media thing from that.
Agreed. There's a big thing now of that running joke of we're musicians. Of course, we're actually content creators or whatever. You
Yeah,
know, that's
yeah.
our real job. It's like, well, you know, I get where you're coming from with that, but it's definitely, I think, a little off-putting, at least to a certain age demographic that didn't necessarily grow up on the TikTok or the Instagram type stuff.
I think it also paints a pretty false expectation of what is acceptable musicality, if that makes any sense. Like in the drumming community, there's been this big thing over the last couple of years of like, I mean, just drummers in the community kind of roasting like the speed drummers of YouTube. Like you have like L Step, Siberiano, whatever, and like just a bunch of other YouTube and Instagram drummers who like the whole thing is just like playing 20-second sound bites of them like playing as fast as possible or like doing fucking stick tricks and shit. And it's like, that is cool, but it doesn't have a shelf life if you were to like take it on the road. Like people would maybe want to see that once or twice, but they're not going to pay for that for an extended period of time. And then all of the younger musicians who are like maybe getting into drums for the first time are going to be wickedly turned off from wanting to progress because they're going to see only like the cream of the crop on Instagram and YouTube, and they're not going to see regular musicians going through like regular musician struggles, which is interesting. But then from the other side of it, like when I was in my high school band, like we put out our debut album and like we literally couldn't get an album release show anywhere in town because we didn't have enough likes on Facebook. And it's one of those things where it's like, well, I can see why venues need that to a certain extent to guarantee that people are going to show up to the show. But at the same time, you know, the fact that our reputation or like our success is now quantized by how many likes we have on a social media platform or how much engagement we get on certain things on Spotify, it is a little disheartening as a musician to want to do things the right way, not purchase likes on the internet and not like, you know,
well, and
it's
an available lever to pull, you know, when you're like kind of how, you know, Kadzo is a relatively new band and we're still having trouble like establishing ourselves. And so, yeah, it's an easy avenue to have like, oh, you know, what's the way we get people to pay attention to us? Make a viral social media post. And we've had a few, don't get me wrong. We've gone dummy viral a couple times.
But they have not elevated the success of...
It means nothing at the end of the day.
And though, you know, when they're authentic and you feel like it's not like some gimmick or advertisement, I think it comes off really well, you know? It's just so many of these, like we're saying, just they're putting the idea of metrics and followers and likes and shares first before they're putting the music, and
100%.
the music oftentimes is not great compared to the
presence.
Yeah, compared to their social media presence or their like production quality. Like a lot of these bands and stuff that we see, they put out like, you know, these 20-second awesome clips or whatever, kind of like you mentioned. But they just, you know, they come from money or something, and they have the ability to hire these really, you know, high quality video recording artists that can help make you look good and stuff, right? And they aren't releasing, they're not releasing like full sets of music. They're just releasing these 30-second clips.
Yeah.
And they come to the venue and they, you know, they'll play a couple good songs, but then it's like they have no stage presence. They're kind of like awkward up there, not knowing what to do next. They run out of material way faster than their time, a lot of times slot, so then they kind of have to bullshit their way through the last hour, next 30 minutes, and that's where it's like, okay, that's where you're not being a real musician there, you're being the content creator. you
Yeah.
know?
Totally.
Yeah.
I think the other thing about that too, and it's kind of shitty, like you can have it happen like against your consent or like without your knowledge. Like it happened with our podcadzo Spotify, where we got added to a playlist where that playlist was using essentially using bot listens to rack up their streams, and like we got punished
Literally,
for that.
without us, like some guy added it to a playlist that had bots, and then Spotify, it was a song Strange at first, Spotify hit us up, or I got a warning being like, hey, we detected bot listens on this, like if it continues on, we're gonna take it off. And then it got taken off the playlist anyways, but then like a week later they just took the song down.
They took it just off
And
of
Yeah,
so,
Spotify
yeah.
completely.
Shame. Yeah.
I went to Spotify and was like, listen, I understand like what you're doing, like yeah, bots are a problem. I understand why Spotify has this, but like we did not pay for this service or anything. And also it got 5,000 listens or something, and we don't know how many are from bots, but like
Sure.
give us the 5,000
Like,
listens.
yeah,
That's
no,
like barely
Yeah,
anything.
they're going
Yeah.
after like very small independent musicians that are racking up very few amounts of artificial streams comparatively to big groups or medium-sized groups who are doing it intentionally just for the whole social media presence thing. So it is shitty. It is a double-edged sword. Like it does need to be controlled,
Yeah.
but also in almost no instance do I blame the artist for like the overall state of the way things are when it comes to like having to maintain a social media presence, but also wanting it to be one that is actively engaged in what's going on. It's a very hard line to walk.
Yeah,
so.
man, it's a real game, and some people are really good at playing it. Some people just have they don't try to play it, and they just have success within the game. And other people, they are aware that it's a fixed game, and they don't want to. They're okay with not buying into it and doing things the hard way, you know. And
Yeah.
I think that's like kind of where we're at more so than anything. Is like we recognize that there's this like game being played. You got to play it a little bit, but you don't have to, you know, make your whole identity about playing this game. You
Totally.
know? Yeah.
Well, and I think the route that you guys have taken is the most commendable route, because as opposed to, you know, focusing more on presence online or whatever it might look like to certain bands, you guys have really just focused on the idea of playing shows and being active in the local scene and opening for other people, being a supporting act when it's appropriate, like being a headliner, working all sides of the bill, and also just working good connections with the people in town is like what'll carry you, what'll establish
Totally.
you and get you the furthest. Because yeah, you guys have been around for what, like 6 years now, 5 years?
Yeah, through different iterations, one form or the other, you know.
It's been a
around
long
that
time. And
yeah.
yeah, it's been cool that I've really only seen the trajectory build, like through all the changes, through all of the uncertainties, like with members leaving, members coming in, and also just like kind of the whole world shutting down for a bit, venues disappearing, shows being harder to book, things being harder to just ultimately like organize in the music world. Like you guys have made it through and also grown consistently as that's happened. So proves that, yeah, just like doing the groundwork, playing good shows, being well rehearsed, and like having good group chemistry is like what ultimately matters the most to listeners that actually like give a shit about what's going on anyway. So
Totally. It's what, you know, it makes us feel better that way too, you know. We're doing it on our terms. And it's what we've had more success than trying to lean into the viral stuff, is just trying to be true to ourselves, play a lot of shows, make friends at those shows, and, you know, hopefully strike a chord with people that resonates and makes them want to give us a follow or come see us again next time we're in town playing or something.
totally.
Yeah.
And it might just be because obviously like we know each other and stuff, but playing with Knuckleball in the past, I would say there's been like a camaraderie and like a friendship and a warmth and like a welcoming that's pretty uncommon in the music not the music business that I should generalize that much, but at least in the Fort Collins scene, it's like
shows.
you
There's
got to be
often an
within the clique.
adversarial vibe.
There is an
when you show up to
adversarial
shows.
vibe,
Competition.
or
Yeah,
like
it's competition.
it's
Yeah.
very
people sizing each other up.
it's cliquey at the very least.
Yeah.
Like groups of people know each other, and there's not really a whole lot of like breaking out of that group and trying to incorporate other groups. And like the hardcore scene, I feel like has always been really good about that, like making sure that other bands besides just purely hardcore bands are like playing hardcore shows, making sure that people feel included and stuff like that. But I would say that the jam band / just like alt rock scene in Fort Collins is like also very strong with that, because like you guys always have like a variety of different bands that you play with. It's not just like you play with the same 2 bands every time. You guys also like incorporate a bunch of different musical styles onto your bills that like aren't just the same type of shit that you're playing, which it means a lot to other bands as well. I think it's just really cool, and also I don't want to say like admirable, because I don't admire you, that'd be fucking gay, but like it's respectable. It's not something that a lot of people like have the courage to do in town and do it with like an open arm kind of friendliness. So yeah, like we both appreciate it, and I think that also is one of those things that like transcends into the crowd as well. Like when you're at one of your shows, like the vibe is just always overwhelmingly positive. Like there's not anyone there who's like pissed off or like wants to leave. All the other bands always stay for like the entirety of everyone else's sets. Like it's just a very good vibe always. So
I appreciate that. Yeah, we try not to be competitive about it. Try to be as welcoming as possible. I think it naturally there's some instances where I don't know if threaten's the right word, but like you definitely feel the pressure from other bands in the scene that you see doing a good job, and instead of dragging each other down to pull yourself up, you could lift each other up a lot. And it's just things as little as like kind of what we were talking about sparked a lot of this conversation earlier, just when we did a show with you guys a few years back, like you two hopping in to do a Ween song with us, right? Just like something as little as inviting other musicians to jam.
Well, yeah,
with
that
you.
invitation meant so much. Like I was so stoked about that.
Yeah.
It really, and it like just going into the night gave it such a better vibe. Like we knew you guys already, so there wasn't any like adversarial thing happening there, but it was just like it was exciting.
It's not like we had particularly like similar styles of music, but I think that's like another thing where like people, specific like booking agents, make such a mistake these days. Is like they'll book some hardcore headliner and they only want to book support that is in the same genre, or they book like a jam band headliner and they only want other jam bands on there. I think that's such a poor way of booking. And like historically you've had these, you get awesome super tours or whatever from these big touring artists, but like, I want to see some variation is good,
100%.
And I think that's how you make a lot of new listeners, because whether they are super familiar with the genre, like if you could bring people to, if we're on a bill with a punk band or something, and we can just play one song that appeals to them, all of a sudden they have a whole new window into a genre of music that they might not have been familiar with. And I think that's just like a great way of getting new fans. It's like people who aren't necessarily even familiar with your genre or say that they don't listen or don't like this kind of genre, get them to see you in a live setting and show that like good music is good music. And I think people appreciate that concept,
100%. Yeah, I agree. And that's kind of like with Foreign Words, my other band, that's like how we've always booked shows. We always want to look for someone who is like the complete opposite of us in some way or another, for the whole purpose of, because Foreign Words plays music that I would say not a lot of people in this town get super into.
Sure.
It's kind of a good way to expose the commonalities of like, well, you think that what we're doing is super different, but it's actually really similar to like, the next show that we're playing is with like a surf rock, like 70s kind of rock and roll band where like they're nothing like us, but the similarities are just in the extremes of like they go super hard in their extremes and we go super hard in our extremes, and there can always be crossover. Like that's the thing, there can always be crossover, even if people say like, oh, you guys don't sound anything like this other band. It would make no sense to play with you guys. And like we wind up playing with a bunch of like heavy like metal bands and stuff in town for that same reason, because a lot of metal bands are starting to, I think, realize the same thing of like it's way harder to sell an all metal bill these days, especially when like half the metal bands are just eyeing each other up and being like, oh well, like we're heavier than you or whatever the fuck it might be. Like it's way better to just break it up, have a bunch of different moods and a bunch of different kind of like archetypes like come together in the same room.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hell yeah. All right, well, I kind of wanted to ask, like, do you have any new music that you like? Any albums that came out this year that you've been super into?
Nothing that, I guess, I enjoyed the newest Black Pumas album that came out. I've been, the music that I've been into lately, it's Tale as Old Time for me, but it's not necessarily music that came out this year or whatever, it's still stuff that was released in 2003 or 2010 or whatever, that I am just now stumbling upon or just like really diving into and gripping me.
Okay. So what are some of those?
Yeah,
then?
so I've been listening to this dude, JJ Gray and Mofro. I saw him years ago at like a music festival in like 2015. Great initials, by the way.
Yeah,
JJ.
JJ.
Yeah, best initials in the biz. But I mean, the album that I've been really into lately is called Orange Blossoms. I think that came out in I want to say 2010, and he came out with a new album this year that I've liked as well, called Rooster. But I still have been like listening to that far less than this Orange Blossoms album, right? Like I'm still working my way into Rooster, even though it came out this year. I'm still kind of like familiarizing and getting this other album down, processing it. And I feel like, that's kind of the story where I am right now. I'm still listening to these like older, not necessarily new albums, but he's a name that comes to mind just because, like, again, he's got the old stuff, but he did put out a new album this year. Been listening to, as always, like neo soul, D'Angelo kind of stuff. I find a lot of like inspiration just from the musicians that he gets on his albums and that he tours with and stuff, going and finding out their side projects, whether it's Isaiah Sharkey or Pino Palladino, Questlove, just I like when these kind of low-key super groups kind of come together, and then going out and exploring each of the individual artists kind of stuff as well.
Dude,
Yeah.
I wanted to bring up, did you see that Miseducation of Lauryn Hill was #1 on the Apple 100 list?
Yeah, that's so funny.
We were talking about you in that episode.
Yeah, man, that was
JJ knew.
Totally. That last episode I was on with you guys, it was like the 90s hip hop kind of vibe episode. Yeah. No, I mean, not surprising, just because, the problem is that no one feels like they're making music like that anymore, It was like this period in time that was so perfectly frozen, that no one has really, I don't know if tried to replicate is the right word, but they haven't replicated it in a way where it like feels authentic to being their own sound while also paying homage to like what Lauryn Hill did on that album,
I feel like it's kind of the same case with rock too, of like what was going on in that time period, where like if you're too obviously a like 90s indie alternative rock bands and sounds, it's like these guys sound like Pavement, they're ripping off Pavement, where it can be the same thing with rap. It's like, okay, yeah, we get it, we've heard Lauryn Hill before.
Yeah,
it's really hard to make that your own because it was such a moment in time and so sincere. And like hard to replicate without ripping off.
Dude, even something, I'll bring it up because I know it's a band you enjoy. Someone like Portugal the Man, like an album like In the Mountain in the Clouds or like Satanic Satanist. It their newest album, whenever that was, like 2 years ago, 3 years or something like that. It's nothing like
they did one
that,
last year.
That mid 2000s, like whatever indie psych mix you kind of want to call or whatever, like that feels like another kind of very frozen in time type of music.
I maintain that In the Mountain in the Cloud is one of the most underrated albums of certainly the 2010s, if not all time.
Yeah.
That album majorly slept on.
Great album.
Yeah.
He finally
great
got me
band.
into Portugal the Man.
Nice. Yeah. was it that album or was it?
No,
some-
it was
yeah.
actually Chris Black changed my life.
The one
yeah.
they released last summer.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Which I liked a lot because of the, I guess, overall attitude of like just fulfilling whatever desire they wanted to fulfill at the like the exact moment that they were tracking the song.
Sure.
Seemingly, like there's a lot of just one-off moments that like you couldn't really predict that they were going to happen, and then when they're over, you're like, oh, I didn't know that was going to end the way that it did either. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of those moments.
It's cool to hear though too because I use that album as a reference just because I feel like their sound has evolved a lot like since the mid 2010s or whatever to that like newest album, but it's cool to hear how you enjoy it and that's kind of the one that got you into it. It means there's still like the music might be different. They're still being authentic to themselves in what they want to do and what they want to put out, and I think that comes across for sure.
Yeah,
you know,
100%.
Whether it's not super similar to what they're playing before, it still feels authentic.
Definitely. And I guess the other part of it too is like when you initially brought it up, you just said it was like the most well-produced album of the year in your opinion, or it was
the
a
sound
contender
of
at
it,
least.
Yeah.
It sounds
Fantastic.
so good. Like everything has such a nice natural like timbre and balance on it.
I was
and it doesn't seem overly produced.
so relieved the first time I heard Chris Black changed my life because Woodstock. Did you like Woodstock?
It's
That was
okay.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
It was at that point where I was like, okay, maybe Portugal the Man isn't one of my favorite bands anymore. But like, I still maintain that Woodstock isn't the greatest album. But Chris Black changed my life. Like validated that album, being like, okay, they needed a Woodstock to get to like this really cool place where they're at.
It's a good
right
way
now.
of looking at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stepping stone.
And obviously Woodstock still had some great songs. on it.
Totally. Yeah, but no,
But as an album,
Yeah, no, I've long appreciated your appreciation for Portugal. I think that they're a really great band. One of the best of the 2010s and 2020s. For sure. Yeah.
Speaking of bands, we wanted to talk about All Them Witches. We've kind of
How long has it been?
Over an hour, which it's much more interesting to talk about Knuckleball and other shit than All Them Witches, as much as we all like that band. But why was All Them Witches on the table? Just because they are coming through town soon?
Yeah, well, I guess it was just that was, Julian and I have long shared music with each other, like starting at Sheba Hut kind of thing, just that we thought the other
Censor
person would vibe. Oh, yeah. Cut it. That we, just thought the other might like dig kind of thing is for me trying to show him phish jams to him trying to show me thrice, It's like it comes full circle.
The whole thing started out with
What
basically
an unbearable battle for the average music listener.
it was
Like,
it was
Phish
horrible
and the
for
Thrice
everybody
song.
else. Like trading Dustin Kensrue like fucking screaming like at 2 a.m. for like a 20-minute guitar jam. No one liked what was going on. But basically, I think where it all started was the idea of trying to show each other new shit. JJ was like insistent on taking me to a show of some kind, and it wound up being that Ween show that we went to. Then the trade-off was like, well, if you take me to a show, I have to take you to a show as well. And at that time, I was going through my like prog math rock phase where I was just like only listening to Chon, and so I wound up taking him to a Chon show with Jared Janzen. Both of the Janzens were there.
Yeah.
And I think that kicked off a long kind of back and forth of like, well, I really liked the Ween show, and then he really liked the Chon show. So it was like, well, if you liked that, then check this out. And that just kind of kept going on for a while. But All Them Witches was a band that I had never heard of that JJ showed me specifically. And the reason why he showed it to me was because, if I remember correctly, it was like, well, they're heavy, like they're stoner rock, but they also like have psychedelic, like neo-psych and some jam influence as well. So it's like a good middle ground, like what I like and what you like together. And now, like 5 years later, they are a top 5 band for me. Like I like worship them and value them very, very highly, and I listen to them all the fucking time, and they've become like a very critical influence to me in my like adult years. And like ever since like essentially hearing them for the first time, it's been like a goal of mine to be like, I need to be in a band that is like All Them Witches someday. Like there needs to be like some sort of door for me to like explore that at some point in the future. And I think that they're just like one of the most underrated, understated, and like best bands of our generation. So, and it's all because of JJ.
I am the reason they're such a big band. But they are, I mean, they're just a great band. Really easy folks to root for in it and stuff, and they just consistently put out, new material and new albums that just don't get worse. It's like a very hard thing to do as a musician is to keep improving, and they do it. I was sorry, Colin. I was just gonna say my introduction to them was at like this jam band festival back in like 2015. It's called Summer Camp Music Festival that goes down in Illinois every summer. And one of those festivals where they got, 3 or 4 big stages, all happening at once. So a lot of sets like overlap. You kind of got to pick and choose who you're going to see and like be okay with missing some artists. And I remember, the drummer at the time that I played in the band with, him and another drummer buddy of mine, they were like, hey, everyone else was going to this different set. I want to say it was this band Mo. They were very insistent on going to see the All Them Witches set that was playing, and I knew nothing about this band, knew nothing, their vibe, nothing. They were just like 2 musicians and friends that I respected their musical opinions. I'm like, all right, I'll go check this out for, 15 minutes before I go over to this other stage. Did that and was just mind blown in that 15-20 minutes that I stayed for it. Wanted to stay for the whole thing, but when you're with a lady, you kind of gotta make some compromises, stick to the plan.
We've
at
all
certain
been there,
times.
brother.
Yeah, but it was just like this amazing combination of like what I felt was like very Ozzy, Black Sabbath-y vibes, but incorporated elements of like the jam bandery music festival that we were at, like some improv, some like slide guitar is really what got me into them, was like this dude slide playing, and I'd never heard it really in a context of like psych rock music like they were doing. And that's when, after that festival, is when I started really getting into them, because I just really admired the way this dude played. It was like a mixture of, Tony Iommi or like Randy Rhoads-esque type of tone from like Sabbath and Ozzy stuff. But this dude had when he would bust out like, the slide or like, some more of his, extended solos, it was very much Allman Brothers sounding me, like very much Dwayne Allman, very Derek Trucksy, very like Sonny Landreth-y. And then even mixed with like vibes of like Primus, like Larry Lalonde, like that weird kind of twangy, obscure slide. It's like this dude was covering these 3 different spectrums of like slide guitar playing that I all love, and that's what really like made me gravitate towards them. And since I got back from that festival, it's just been this ongoing love affair with that band. Yeah,
that's rad.
Yeah.
It's cool to get that into a band after seeing him live. Like that's a very earnest way to become a fan of a band. I've always been a pretty casual fan of All Them Witches. Like I've been aware of them since probably like 2013, I think is when I started listening to them. But yeah, like very casual fan. So this might be naive, not knowing much about them, but it seems like they've had a really cool career, like enviable career, where they've maintained a lot of respect and coolness this whole time through without getting to like the level of like being a big bullshit band.
Totally. And I think that they've done that. They are very DIY in a sense. Like all the artwork came for years, was coming from their drummer. They were never signed to like some big label. I think they they recorded at some heavy hitter studios. Like I think they put one of their live albums out. It was like, or one of the albums they did at like Abbey Road. One was like down in, I could be wrong. It could have been Muscle Shoals, but some type of studio down south, either in Alabama or Nashville. That's just kind of a more renowned studio.
They are from Nashville, right, or that area?
Yeah, that's what they. I think that's where the band, like they say they're from. Some, I think they're more mixed out. Like one's from Louisiana, one's from Florida. Kind of.
I lived in Nashville like 2015, 2016, and you couldn't walk down the street without hearing about All Them Witches.
Really?
Like there's a lot of local pride.
They
then
did.
About All
Very
Them
cool.
Witches.
Yeah, they did start in Nashville, like right after their drummer, who was the founding member, like moved there from Portland. So
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
word.
Yeah, which is cool. You know, that the founding member drummer left a couple months ago, which is a crazy thing to think about.
super sad. Yeah.
Yeah.
It made me very grateful for seeing
You guys
the
saw him at
original
Rocket Piss.
lineup that one time that we did see them, just because like, and I did a little bit of casual research just to prepare for this episode, but I guess like what really kind of birthed the original idea for All Them Witches was the drummer making like a demo tape where he played like all the instruments, and then kind of when he was in Nashville was just looking for people to like help him play it live essentially.
Sure.
So I think, you know, like the original ethos like is his in a lot of ways. And it's sad, like, it's cool he's leaving to pursue other projects and stuff. I'm excited to see what he does, but it's also, for me, I feel like just super sad because they're essentially, like, there are 4 of them, but it is heavy power trio vibes a lot of the time.
Sure.
And so it just feels like they're losing something pretty crucial.
Yeah, it's very interested to see them on this next tour, see how it sounds and stuff. He definitely felt like a crucial backbone, like very distinct style of drumming that really fits that band well.
Yeah.
It's like, again, it's just that perfect mix, like I was kind of saying, of that mix of like the Sabbathy type vibes, Queens of Stone Age type vibes, mixed with like Santana or the Allman Brothers. You know, it's just like it's very you know, heavy on the toms, but not overly like complicated, but also mixing in those like cool time signatures and stuff.
Yeah. Super, like, at the end of the day, just focused on being incredibly, like, groovy and not overly technical, I guess I would say. Like, there's not, like, a whole lot of fills that, like, oppose, like, a rhythm that's already happening. Like, everything that happens lines up with what's happening in the other instruments. And I was also mind blown when we saw that show. The dude only uses the one cymbal, which I thought was really crazy. Like, in the studio, it sounds like he's using at least 2.
Dude, it sounds like he's like overdubbing sometimes. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
Even he uses that one huge ride or whatever that he has. I forget the name of it, but he only uses one floor and one rack tom too, and he gets such a huge like varied sound. You know, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, he definitely hits, like, the way that he plays is more about like accenting certain notes in a consistent rhythm than like breaking a rhythm or splitting a rhythm up into like a bunch of different little ideas. Like, his accents and the way that he just highlights the other things happening at the same time is what's really impressive.
It's based way more in like groove than in prog rock, you know?
Yeah, 100%, which most of the time, especially in neo-psych, the drummer is trying to go like as crazy as fucking possible and like oppose what's happening to every extent. So it is a very nice change. And one thing that you mentioned to me when we saw them at the show that I didn't know, that it stuck with me and obviously makes like a lot of sense in hindsight now. Like, the drummer came into the group with like a lot of previous influence from like Grateful Dead, Phish, maybe not so much Phish, but yeah, like Grateful Dead and like Allman Brothers Band and groups like that. So Robbie Stabler, the drummer, he met the guitarist first, and the guitarist's name is Ben, I believe. And so Ben and Robbie started playing like jazz together at first, and then almost immediately they were like, "Oh, like fuck this! This needs to be like way heavier."
Sure.
And so now because obviously like they've changed a lot over the years with their discography too, but like I think there's always been a pretty heavy blues and like a little bit of neo soul like jazz influence in their music, and so like you telling me about the whole, you know, Grateful Dead plus Led Zeppelin thing really made me realize like it all fell into place. I was like, oh yeah, that's like exactly what's going on. Like, because before that I always thought, you know, they were kind of just like a one-off. Like, there's not too much that sounds like All Them Witches in my opinion. But then
I was
through that
so-
lens, it's like, oh, I totally get it. So
Yeah.
Being like a casual fan of them, I did like their music, but I was pretty reductive about it. I like forever I was like, yeah, all them, which is like that like kind of blues rock band. They're cool, I guess. But since we've been doing this episode, or had this episode planned, I've been listening to their whole catalog. I'm like, how did I miss this like doom stoner rock influence?
Yeah.
It's like way more prevalent than just the blues stuff. I think it's because when I first started listening to them, it was like in that pocket of like blues rock being the thing, like all the Jack White side projects and
Being in
and that-
Nashville too,
being
you
in
know,
Nashville,
it's not so
exactly.
much that stoner rock vibe. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's why I was like kind of reductive to their genre.
and it has also, I would say, changed a fair bit. Like
Yeah.
it started out being way more like blues influenced, and like I would say almost like improv influenced, and their later stuff tends to be a bit more like structural, a bit more like intentional. So
Mhm.
Yeah, I would say up until they did that like Baker's Dozen thing this like last year, where they were releasing that like one song a month. That's when it started to get a little bit more towards like the experimental sounding to me. I feel like where they're kind of getting back to a little bit of those roots. But yeah, like I'm glad you mentioned how like just when I like you said like when I listen to him like Parks, he brings that little dirtier, little less refined kind of aspect to him. I really and you could hear that in his playing. In Robbie Stabler's drumming, you know, you hear a lot of that. Or like I said, early Santana, Grateful Dead. Like I think that's why his sound sounds so big. Is sometimes he sounds like it's two drummers back there, even though he's got such a small kit. It's just this really really heavy sound
and big drums too.
Big drums,
He plays
yeah,
like
for
a
sure.
26-inch kick drum.
Damn.
Yeah, small pieces on his kit, but huge drum
Yeah.
set. And yeah, like and Ben, he had that Allman Brothers hippie background as well, and I hear a lot of that in his playing, and that's kind of what stuck out to me right away. Also, got to give a shout out. They have like the Rhodes player too, which I feel like a lot of like stoner rock kind of stuff missing out on the keyboard, and I think the keyboards kind of like keep that. It pulls back to that jammy kind of vibe,
Totally.
you know,
Yeah.
because you can only get so distorted or heavy with the keyboard. It kind of is bright in general, you know.
Well,
Yeah.
and just the amount of like weird textural sounds that he adds,
Yeah.
like especially like that the album Sleeping Through the War has like some of the absolute fucking coolest like synth sounds, and like just I don't even know if they're samples or if they're just sounds that he made himself. But like all the layers and textures on that record are just like impeccably good and like soundscaped. You know, like you can tell that
totally,
they
man.
got exactly what they needed for like that exact moment of the song, and they didn't like settle for like Casio sample sound number 999 or whatever.
Totally. That's a great album, man. Sleeping Through the War is maybe my favorite by them, honestly.
I was gonna ask you to make like a ranking list, but I don't think I gave you enough time.
I would say that Sleeping Through the War is probably number one.
Which year's that one? Is that the 2016 album?
2016.
Let's
Yeah.
go through this list really
That's
quick.
a great.
Sure.
I
We've
released
got
another record today.
Our Mother Electricity in 2012, and then I just want to say the list really quick because it's fucking super impressive.
Yeah.
Dying Surfer Meets His Maker 2015, Lightning at the Door 2016, Sleeping Through the War 2017, and then the All Them Which is self-titled 2018, and then Nothing as the Ideal in 2020. So essentially a record a year minus the 2 years from the self-titled to Nothing as the Ideal, and then like the 3 years from the debut to the
Was
next one.
2020 their last release? I thought they had like a 2022 album.
So in 2022, they released The Baker's Dozen,
Yeah.
as JJ referred to it earlier.
Gotcha.
Essentially one song a month plus like an additional song. They released 2 songs 1 month, but they never went through and like compiled them onto like one
Okay.
solid release. It's still just a shitload of singles, but I think a
Yeah.
bunch of people in the All Them Witches universe like would definitely group them together as like one group of songs because they have very
Totally.
similar artwork. Overall, pretty similar concept of just like super psychedelic, like super neo, super out there, and
Yeah.
like a lot of just like super spaced out shit happening.
Yeah, and like a few songs that are like 12 minutes or something like
Yeah.
that. You know, like they just got in the studio and hit record and probably jam for like 30 minutes, and then they're like, okay, this 12-minute thing sounds awesome. We're just gonna cut this out and make it a single.
Totally.
Yeah.
And there's also like that one like tape loop song where the
Yeah.
whole thing is just like samples from like one bit of tape loop. Yeah. So it's very interesting. But yeah, sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, I think I would go Sleeping Through the War, Lightning at the Door. For different, third, probably a toss-up between ATW and Dying Surfer meets his maker. I like that, like, to my ears, ATW and Sleeping Through the War sound like when they took that next step up as far as, like, recording quality in studio recording. Those feel like they were maybe done with a professional, quote parentheses professional, not like their other albums sounded bad or anything. They're just a little more raw. You can hear that rawness. And whereas Dying Surfer and Lightning at the Door, they still have that rawness to them. And I feel like I really like the song choices on those ones, maybe a little bit more than ATW, but ATW sound like to my ears and headphones, it sounds like a better album, like a little bit better production, you know? Yeah.
It's also, I would say, their most like minimalistic album in a lot of ways. Like it seems like that was the record where they were like trying to define like what the 2.0 version of All Them Witches would be. Like it was a bit of like the stepping stone record from being like bluesy and jammy and super raw into being like more refined, more like hi-fi, and also I would say more just like generally influenced by like stoner rock, because all stoner rock pretty much focuses on being like as like tonal as possible in a lot of ways. So
Yeah, stripped down a little bit. I feel that album feels like, but also that same big sound that they put
huge.
out. You know?
Totally.
I got to give a shout out too to the Live at Brussels or Live from Brussels, whatever that album title is. If you need a live album to listen to, that's as good of a sounding live recording as I've ever heard, maybe from any live release ever.
I was gonna
Like,
say the same thing about Live on the Internet.
Yeah,
because
same thing, man.
like
Yeah.
that one's a bit different because it's a COVID release, so they just like did it in a studio. There's no audience or anything, but it is, in my opinion, like the highest quality studio performance that I've like ever heard.
It's crazy.
Like
man.
it's mixed so fucking good. There's moments where like you kind of forget that it's a live performance because it just sounds incredibly studio, which is really, really cool from a band that like I think, you know, when you see them live, it is all about like the uniqueness of that one show that you're seeing. But then when you listen to like a live album, it does feel like still incredibly cohesive, if that makes any sense.
I listen to a lot of live like sets inherently just because, you know, that's kind of how Grateful Dead, Allman Brothers, Phish, they blew up so much because they had tapers recording these live sets, and then eventually, you know, Phish was one of the first to like be recording the soundboards, then releasing them later that evening to the ticket buyers. You can go and download the set that you just saw.
Or like Dick's Picks with
The
Dead.
Dead, exactly. And on top of like their official live releases, which are all like insanely high quality live versions of songs, and I think that's like the high qualityness from like the Dead and the Phish that they got with those. That's kind of what set them apart in a lot of ways from maybe some of the other bands that were trying to do the same thing at the same time. Like they just didn't have those live recordings that were either, I don't want to say held up, because I think a lot of it probably goes into like who is mixing and mastering those sets and stuff. Like Phish has their guy, Dead had their guy, but All Them Witches, like to my ears, they are on that level easily where they're just the live production and live quality is just kind of unmatched by anyone else in the genre to me.
I think that it also does seem like they take being a good live band very seriously.
Sure.
Like some bands, especially like, not to again be reductive and sound like an asshole, but like in like the pop world and like the rap world and stuff like that, it's more about like putting on a production than it is about like being a solid live performer.
Yeah.
And there's some groups where like I think they maintain the whole idea of like, if you're not good live, then you just kind of you're just not good. Like if you're a studio band, then you're not worth your salt necessarily, which I also kind of disagree with. Like there's some studio bands where it's like the Beatles, like they're a studio band.
Totally.
But like, you know, you definitely have like there's a whole other aura about a band where like they're confident about their live performances enough to like have multiple live releases on streaming services, and also bring attention back to the fact that like being able to perform live and be solid live is like super important to like a neo psych type scene where like improvisation and just like vibe of a show is like almost as important as the material that's being played. So
Totally.
yeah.
Hell yeah.
And that's why we want to talk about All Them Witches.
Yeah,
you
hell of a
fucking
band.
prick.
Hell of a band. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I feel filled in. JJ, we've failed to plug your podcast. We talked about it before we started recording.
Oh,
But
sure.
let's shout that out.
Yeah, my podcast sucks a little bit, but if anyone out there likes MMA, betting on MMA, it's called Stranglers and Anglers. It's like 95%
Great name. I've always
betting.
loved the name.
Yeah, betting on stranglers and fighters, and 5% we talk about fishing sometimes. We're big fishing fans.
Was
hence
that
the
purely
Anglers. Yeah.
for the rhyme? Like, I
Purely
guess
for
we
the
could talk
rhyme.
about
Yeah,
fishing.
it's like we either fit in 3 minutes of fishing or we got to change the name of the
Yeah.
podcast. Yeah, so easy. Yeah.
Here's the obligatory fishing section, guys.
Yeah.
Did you go fishing this week? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. In other news.
Yeah. What'd you catch? Nothing. Cool.
That's the way she goes. We'll wrap this up in a second, but JJ, my last question for you.
Yeah, sure.
This maybe came up the first time we recorded a pod. Do you like Oasis?
I am indifferent. I do not
Take
know
that.
enough about them outside of like their big hits.
Their hits.
You know, like Champagne Supernova, that kind of thing.
I did want to mention
yeah.
this at the top, and we didn't because this is more important.
Yes.
But you obviously saw the news, right?
That's why I'm
The
bringing it
potential
up.
news.
We have to. I mean, it's official now.
Well,
Oasis is
but-
reuniting.
But without any of the original members besides the Gallaghers.
Is that
Yep.
confirmed?
Mhm. Well, it was confirmed by the Rolling Stone, at least.
Okay. Like any of
Like Bone.
yeah, I knew Bonehead wasn't going to participate, but or I'm sure he'll guest appear on.
It said that no original member besides either of the Gallaghers was going to be part of any of the shows. They're going to be using
But
High Flying Birds.
because all of the original members minus Nolan Liam left around Standing on the Shoulder of Giants time. So will it be members who were in the band after that, like Gam Archer or Andy Bell?
It just said there were going to be no band
Okay.
members besides the two brothers. And the whole band for the shows is going to be the High Flying Birds band.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Because maybe controversial opinion, but my favorite lineup of Oasis is the Gam Archer and Andy Bell lineup, not the original lineup.
But I thought you had like a weird thing for the original lineup.
Well, I have a weird thing for those first couple albums, but their live performances with that new lineup were on a different level. The musicianship jumped.
It's just like, okay, so if like
Where does the beef come from?
It's kinda like-
was it the brothers beefing?
yeah, it's
Okay,
Nolan
got-
Liam entirely. Yeah.
and then everyone else just left because they're like, you guys are fucking stupid. Like this is bullshit. Grow up. And then everyone
and they
quit.
just couldn't handle the fame and pressure that they
Wah,
reached.
wah.
So
So
successful.
Nolan
Look
Liam
at
ate it
me.
for breakfast.
I don't
They
know,
loved it.
like,
Sure,
is
sure,
that? Are
yeah.
you really gonna? You're really gonna be satisfied with that as a reunion?
No, I'm not. That's just Liam.
That's just
showing
the
up
two
for a high
most
flying
showboatiest ones
Yeah.
being
I've-
showboaty for attention.
I've always had complicated feelings about Oasis reuniting. Most diehard Oasis fans have been hoping for it every day since they broke up in 2009. But I've always kind of wished in my heart of hearts that they'd never reunited.
I can't believe it was 2009. Like it feels like they broke up in like
like
mid
in the
90s. Yeah,
I know.
Yeah.
No, they made it all the
fucking stupid.
And it was so they had broken up so many times, before that in 2009. They were playing a show in Paris, and Nolan and Liam have an infamous relationship and fighting all the time.
Explosive. Sure, yeah.
So yeah, like that's why there's Oasis has been so big in the press, especially in the UK press, is just because there's always such a drama around Nolan
Sure.
and Liam in their fights. And so, like, yeah, they had a typical pre-show fight. Like, Liam smashed one of Noel's guitars before the show, and
Damn, dude.
they just one of them stormed off, and that was just the end of Oasis. Like, that was in 2009, and they never got back together. Noel's the one who made it like official, a break in the band. I think Liam still wanted the band to go on. But yes, since then, every year there's rumors and buzz about Oasis reuniting. Like, since I've been an Oasis fan, which was around that time, like 2009, 2010, every year there's clickbait articles like, oh, potential Oasis reunion, and it's never materialized.
Noah broke Liam's guitar.
Liam broke Noel's.
Yeah, well, sorry, Liam. It's kind of up to Noel at that point if he wants, what I mean. Like, you don't get to break someone's guitar and be like, well, you could still be in the band. Like,
there's this great story when they were recording their second album, which is the big one. It's What's the Story, Morning Glory. That's one, Champagne Supernova and Wonderwall.
The least horrible one.
They
this isn't a U2. We're not in unison here.
This is very much
I think
battle.
U2 might be one of the
battle.
only times that we agree.
Sure.
Which speaks to the power of U2, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Julian hates Oasis with a passion. But there's this great story from that recording session where they were like, I forget the name of the studio, but it's where Queen did Bohemian Rhapsody. They recorded that same studio. It's like in the English countryside. And there was nothing to do all day except go to the pub. So Liam laid down on his vocals and then was just bored. So he went to the pub and got wasted every day and then would come back and just bother Noel in the studio. And they had just fired their original drummer and brought in a new drummer who was stoked to be included in the sessions for that album because he knew it was going to be a big album. And the first night he was there, Liam came back to the studio and they got into this absolute blowout fight. Like, it came to blows. They were literally punching each other in the face.
Damn.
One of them cracked a cricket bat over the other one and broke the bat. And the drummer was watching all this being like, oh my God, I thought I was going to join Oasis and they're obviously breaking up now. How could anyone get past what's going on right now? They're literally fighting each other in the mud. And one of the other members was like, this has been every night. Don't worry. They'll make up in the morning.
Tomorrow.
So that just points to the contentious
Explosive.
relationship.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
I don't. Besides the fact that their music is average at best, the fucking just nonstop. There's never been a moment where there's not just drama. They're famous because of the drama.
No, well, yeah, partly, but that's also
Mostly these days they're famous because of the drama.
They've been
is
very
shitty.
crafty about stretching this drama
It's
out over
calculated
15
almost,
years.
you
It's
would
pretty
say.
impressive. Yeah,
It's very stupid
it
in
is
a lot of ways.
calculated,
It's more of it's the larger than life personalities from the 90s. I hate them all. They're all so fucked in the head. Except for Dave Grohl's the one dude that got out of the 90s and is okay. Everyone else, they just do this whole thing where they're your personality has to be 11 out of 10 before you can even be considered to be worthy of being famous. And then all you do, everyone that was around them in the 90s just talks about how shitty it was and how much they hated it. It wasn't enjoyable for anybody. And the only thing that we got was two decent
Oasis.
albums.
Yeah, they obviously enjoyed themselves.
Yeah, just clinging on to their reputation and the dramatics and stuff to stay relevant without actually having to tour
Do
or
anything,
do any work. Yeah.
Well, what's been funny to see is in the wake of this announcement of them reuniting, how much Oasis hate has surfaced.
Sure.
You go on into the comment section of any of the social media posts where they've announced it, and I saw one today, and it's mostly British people talking shit because that's really the only people who care about Oasis. By the way, people in America who what you said I know the song Champagne Supernova, but the vibe in Britain is I think was well summarized by a tweet I saw today where it was they are an acceptable pub band at best.
Exactly.
Nice. I love that. That's awesome.
I wholeheartedly disagree. I think you should give Oasis a chance.
Why?
Listen to the
Sure.
first two albums. They're legitimately anthemic, great classic songs.
I will.
Liam Gallagher is the best rock star of all time. God. It points to the power of his personality and his charisma that he has managed to stay relevant this whole time since 2009 without being
Or
an Oasis.
he's just like the 90s white Kanye West where he's just like, pay attention to me. Me. Pay attention to me.
well,
Hey, me. He like literally won't let people forget about him. People would be happy to just never think about him again if he just fucked off.
He just keeps popping up there. Yeah.
His solo career is really like he has a very respectable
It's
solo
true,
career.
yeah. I
He's-
even will say his solo career there's been some good stuff. But the thing is, like, just let it be that then. Because even when he, like,
Yeah.
oh my God, he'll still put out solo shit. The last time he put out a solo album, he still found a way to just be like, yeah, like, fuck Oasis, like...
Yeah, most of the songs on the last one were about Noel directly.
Where does he stand on the Jews?
I would guess probably it's not looking great for,
Okay,
for the
sure.
Jewish community.
Right on. Just always curious when you're bringing up those big personalities and Kanye and stuff.
I
Yeah.
dream of having Liam on here, and that will be the first question I ask him.
Yeah.
Liam, where are you standing on Gentiles?
How about the
these days?
Jews? Yeah. Can I leave you guys on a piece of band drama, like one last note? Because we were
Please do.
talking about all them witches. Their drummer leaving apparently was because he started getting very like anti-vaxxy kind of vibes, mixed with him wanting to do his own thing with his girlfriend. Have you watched The Sopranos before?
Oh, have I watched it this week, dude?
Dude,
I've seen
yeah,
that
hell
show
yeah.
so many
Okay,
times.
So Drea De Matteo, who plays Christopher
I'm in love with
Moltisanti's
her.
fiance,
Yeah.
that's the drummer from All Them Witches, his girlfriend, wife. Isn't that crazy?
That's
Kind of
insane.
Yeah, which is
Wow.
funny because she has that episode where they like bring Christopher to the studio and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
she like manages the bar for
Totally,
a while.
yeah. But so basically, people are kind of in the All Them Witches Reddit forums and stuff. They're like saying like she's like the Yoko Ono of the All Them Witches right now, putting a lot of blame on like her and stuff, which I don't think is necessarily fair. But that's like where the All Them
that's the
Witches
go-to
drama.
for
So
us.
wait,
Yeah.
he's the one with the anti-vax vibes?
Robbie Stabler, yeah,
Okay.
the drummer, yeah, and he, apparently that was just like coming through in ways that.
Well, if you start
You know.
dating an Italian chick, you're naturally gonna.
I mean, come
At
on,
a
you're-
certain
you're-
point,
yeah,
you're not
come
gonna have
on,
any
yeah.
brain cells fucking left.
Christopher Columbus was a hero in this household. Yeah.
Oh, that's one of the best lines.
Hell yeah.
All right, well, that's a high note to end off on. JJ, thanks so much for being here, brother.
Thank
It's
you
a lot
guys
of
for
fun.
having me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're welcome
really appreciate
anytime.
it.
Come back
Yes,
soon.
please come back soon.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Well, shit. There is one more thing we have to say before we wrap up. I'm sorry. Just go check out Sicily on Spotify. Go check out River Runs Dry on Spotify. There'll be another song, I guess, in about a month, supposedly. So, but there's those two for now on all streamers. So go check them out. Check out Knuckleball on fucking Instagram as Knuckleball Band. Do you guys have a YouTube?
We do. We got like 37 followers. So if you guys want to
That's
help
not
us
bad.
get to 40,
Go hit up that YouTube.
It'd be doing a lot for us. Yeah.
There are exactly 3 people listening to this podcast
Yeah.
right now at this moment.
All
So-
the
Yeah,
cat
all the-
zomies out there, get us to 40.
cat
Yeah.
Cat
zomies.
zombies, I
Yeah.
like that. Nice.
Cats homosexuals.
Ooh, yeah.
Well, okay. We'll think about that. All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you. Love you. Bye.